I'm here with Chris of Winterfylleth to talk about the upcoming new album, The Unyielding Season, out March 27th on Napalm Records. Pleasure to see you. Pleasure to talk to you. How's things going?
Going well, thank you. Yeah, nice to speak to you guys again too.
So let's get into this record. I feel like we have to take a step into the past, into the Imperious Horizon, before we look into this album. How much did the previous record uh, impact the direction of this album, not just musically, but obviously lyrically?
It's interesting. I think conceptually more than anything, the last album is about, I guess, as we spoke about at the time, it's about the sort of snowy mountain, the kind of the mist, the haze, there being this ominous looming evil that's kind of hidden behind the horizon. Like, obviously the use of horizon as a kind of, there's always something happening over the horizon there, like dawn breaks over the horizon, there's an army just behind there, whatever it might be. And I think it was kind of about a precursor of like what could be. And I think since then, I was reflecting on, life here in the UK and sort of how it's been in Europe and maybe my perception of it around the rest of the world that we sort of see news from. It feels like the world is a crazy and divided place, much more than it was even a few years ago. And so I guess the new cover was to sort of reflect maybe like a world on fire, the this kind of raging wildfire of things that have been going on ever since, and almost like the evil has like revealed itself, and it's just this kind of deluge of constant craziness and constant fear and constant pressure and constant policy and constant whatever it might be kind of being pushed into the world affecting regular people. So I suppose the overarching concept of what we were trying to achieve with this one was obviously that visceral fiery wildfire image that sort of speaks to, the world is on fire. And then I guess conceptually behind that, it was about trying to articulate some of those specific, you know, points of view that sort of sit behind it, some of the specific things that have been happening in the world, and some, tales from our own perspective or kind of reflections on various aspects of the world. And so I guess as a band with some platform, it sort of felt like not just for me, but speaking to other journalists this last few weeks, speaking to people who've heard the record, people at the label, or wherever, it feels like everyone is sort of sensing the same thing and feels uncomfortable and unsettled in the world, and like the landscape is always changing, and there's never a kind of solid footing to be stood on. And so I don't know, I think it's been a you know there's that famous saying like I hope you live in interesting times, and I guess like it feels like we're kind of getting into one of them now. It certainly feels like one of the most unsettled periods I think in my lifetime that I can remember. And I don't know if that reflects true for you. Obviously I don't live everywhere, but everyone I've spoken to seems to feel like that's the case for them. So I'm almost interested again in like perhaps how that seems to you too.
Yeah, there's to me, there's, man, when I was preparing some questions for you for this chat, it was really difficult for me because this record, man, I've been listening to you guys for a long time. This record for me was such an interesting album from so many different points of view. Some I feel like I understood, and some I feel like I didn't. So let me start off with one that I thought was really interesting, which was the artwork. So when I saw the artwork on this record, like The Forest on Fire, I was like, I think this is the more doom and gloom album artwork you guys have ever done. But I wasn't 100% sure. So I went and I checked, and I was like, it is. It is. Like we've gone from like beautiful sceneries throughout. Then last record was, a slope, a mountain slope. I mean, still beautiful. It's desolated. There's a sense of no life whatsoever. But now it's not just that there's no life. You guys are ending life with everything burning down on this record. So I thought from that, just from a pure artwork standpoint, you guys pushed it into a completely new realm that I don't feel like you guys have ever been there. It is you explained a little bit how you got there, but does that make you feel also uncomfortable in terms of allowing the world around you push you creatively into this abyss, if you will?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. But I isn't there some kind of thought process about like you have to kind of step outside of your comfort zone to be able to find find new areas of development for yourselves. And I guess in some ways the concept has probably pushed us into new aesthetic territory. I mean, it's still a scene of nature. It's still a view of the world, but it's a darker view of the world, isn't it? And in some ways, it also speaks to this idea, which I think is popular in, obviously Western culture, of the kind of like phoenix from the flames, and like you have to burn it down to start again. I suppose I'm not advocating like people go and set fire to everything, but I guess the point of view being that the world is in an odd place right now, and I think there's a lot of bad ideas in the world being instigated by, you know, I don't know, like careless people who are definitely don't have everyone's best interests or freedoms at heart. And so I think that the fire, in a sense, is almost burning down the walls around us that are the ones of the mind, that the political, the social, those kind of things, and sort of starting again. So when you're if you're me, when you're writing a record, you need that overarching concept to sort of think about what you're aiming at. And I certainly don't know if I've gone into this thinking like I want to write an angry album or I want to write a heavier album or something like this. But when you have that concept in mind, and I guess just as a reflection of the world that you live in, these things just come out. And I once had a really interesting conversation with my pal Ivar from Enslaved, and he was sort of talking about that you sometimes have to kind of listen to the universe and just like play your instrument and kind of pluck these little moments out when they kind of arise. And I think we did that quite well this time. But then the sentiment of those things, I guess, reflects in perhaps the song title, I guess the slightly more aggressive nature, perhaps of some of the songs on this
Mhm.
record, and certainly a feeling of it maybe being a little bit heavier, a little bit darker, and a little bit
Darker.
more
Yeah, I was going to say both
introverted.
heavier and darker album, also less atmospheric than previous records.
I think so, but then there's room for all of it. And I guess the first four or five songs are kind of very aggressive, very kind of heads down. But then, the journey sort of gets a bit more epic. It breaks to an acoustic moment, much more reflective and kind of introverted. Then it kind of builds to the sort of title track, and then through tracks like In Ashen Wake. And there's a lot more kind of brooding and like big, longer developing songs. And then, it ends the sort of formal I guess album with the track Toward Elysium, which is almost like this like slight glimmer of hope. Like, can there be hope at the end of this? Like, will the people who do all this crazy stuff in the world kind of come to answer for what they've done, what they've instigated into everybody's lives, into normal people's lives? Taking away people's freedoms, like kind of pushing people into conflict with one another, and all these kind of things. And so it offers a kind of melancholy hope, I suppose, before the kind of acoustic track sort of takes it out. So it starts very virulent, but then there is room for kind of a breath and a pause for reflection, and then a bit more epic atmosphere. So I think I maybe like you come from an era where the album is an important thing as an entire entity, rather than how it perhaps lots of people interact with music these days, which is on playlists or as singles or whatever it might be. But I can't change what we are, and we need to write that thing that's a journey of songs, and it's an emotional journey and a spiritual journey and a musical journey, as well as it having a virulent and kind of angry tone, I suppose.
Yeah, for me, my journey starts with looking at the artwork. So I look at the artwork, I'm like, okay, I did my research. This is a more brutal, for lack of a better term, artwork. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is a hint in terms of what I'm going to get once I press play on the record. And once I press play on the record, I'm like, wow, definitely a darker album. Sounds really heavy, really dark, not narrow, but like it has a big landscape to it. The sound travels really well on this album. So I start to see the essence of the artwork being displayed now in the lyrical themes and in the songs. And then we hit where I really need your help here, which is the instrumental tracks. I didn't see those coming at all, because there's no hint on an album that starts off as dark and heavy
Yeah,
as
yeah,
this
yeah.
one does. There's no hint that we're gonna get two songs like that. The last track to me made more sense because it's the closing track. I mean, obviously, if you don't count the cover song, the
Yeah,
bonus
yeah,
track,
yeah.
it is the closing track. So I can understand the light at the end of the tunnel, at the end of the journey. But the previous one, it threw me for a loop. I'm like, man, what's happening here? So what was the thought process for you guys, not just from creating the songs, but then where you decide to land them on the track listing of this record?
Yeah, it's always a hard one when you're putting together the flow of an album. From my perspective, there's this kind of need in your mind to curate what you think is the right journey, and there's always a bit of debate about where that tide needs to kind of roll back a little bit. And I think if you're a, you know, if you're a brutal death metal band or something and your whole thing is just 10 tracks of just unrelenting 30 minutes of, technical mastery, then that's fine. But there is an emotional and a spiritual undertone to a lot of the Winterfylleth stuff. And so even though this one is aggressive and even though it's a bit more in your face, certainly the first half of it, there needs to be a moment just for the I guess to pause for reflection, for there to be that moment of, like I say, the sort of the waves to hit the beach and the tide to roll back, and there to be this sort of like reflective point in the album that also that's like from the journey of a listener. It's very difficult to listen to relentless,
Mhm.
impassioned black metal for so long. You need a pause, and so I thought we'd start heavy and fast and strong, and then, like you say, the it's not uncharacteristic necessarily because we have them on a lot of our albums, but certainly an, one that you like you say you're not expecting that just kind of comes out of it. And I think that what comes with that one, with the cello, with the sort of tone of that one, is a quite reflective and sort of sorrowful, mournful kind of track that almost is the I don't know, perhaps the crying after the anger, or the sort of the morose feeling after the anger, and stages of grief, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Perhaps there's some of that in it. And if you think about, um, I guess, an unspoken elegy, obviously an elegy is kind of like a poem or prose to someone that you kind of have loved and lost, I guess. And so it's unspoken because it's not lyric, and you're meant to feel it through the music. And I guess it's a pause for reflection. So could it have been a 8 track just black metal album? Probably, but then that's not what we are. So well, it's not all of what we are. And there's this vein of the the acoustic and the need to pull the atmosphere into different places, I guess. And so I hope that's what that track does, and it gives people pause for reflection, and then it builds slowly again from there, and then gets a bit bigger towards the end. So the peaks and troughs of a journey through an album, not just a one hit single and 8 tracks of filler. Hopefully.
When I was listening to the album, I think the main difference, like you said, it's not necessarily anything new for you guys, but I think where for me it felt different and new is that in previous albums, I've always felt like whenever you guys introduce a track like this, there's some hints that something like this is coming. You can see little breadcrumbs in previous tracks that kind of lead you to then that realization. You know what I mean? And in this one, there was nothing. It was just like you go from this onslaught of sound and just anger and darkness and everything else into this almost peaceful bliss, just like on a dime. It changes on a dime, and that to me is where things were different from previous records, where that unexpected moment, there was no previous revelation to it that I thought was really interesting. That
I'm
has
glad.
taken me a long time. I'm being honest with you. It's taken me a long time to adjust to it. Now it's different because I've listened to the album. I don't know how many times. So now I know it's coming. My ears are better adapted for
Yeah.
what's to follow. But I remember the first 2 times that I went through the record. I was like, what is happening here? Like, what did these guys are doing to me? Like how do you parachute this song in here, you know? So no, it was just such a almost like out of body experience for me because I'm not used to seeing you guys doing something as drastic as this on a record.
Maybe that's a good thing. I think whether or not I agree with it necessarily, like sometimes people's criticism of the band is like it's so consistent and it's so kind of, it's strange to be criticized for being consistent. But then
Yeah,
I
it
think,
is a weird one.
um,
It's like
yeah,
being criticized
and
for being good.
yeah, yeah, well, maybe, yeah, and just having a consistent quality, hopefully. But then like you need these moments, like I say, like a shot in the arm or like a little kind of change off to one side. And because we're not doing like like some technical death metal. If you think about death metal albums, what the way that they're created, they just like left hand, right hand turn all the times. There's never like a linear flow always to the tracks and things like that. And so I suppose if you heard that in I don't know, an immolation record or something like this, you would be like, well, of course it's just stopped, done a cymbal hit, and then taken off on a different trajectory at 1,000 miles an hour. But then when you do that in a black metal record, there's always this kind of flowing and evocative atmosphere that's just sort of like churns along that becomes this kind of time melting, perceptionless haze you get into if you're really into the album in your headphones or whatever. And so when you throw those moments in, it almost gives you the, you know, I don't know, you're facing a ball of ice or going outside in a storm or something. It's like a little pause, isn't it? And so I'm glad that even though it's taken you a while, I think sometimes that's a good thing. How many albums do you continue to love that took you one listen to like? I don't think you do you? You need
Yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah. I know there's some records that I absolutely, it's not the case with this one, but there's some records I absolutely hated when they came out. I always go back to Far Beyond Driven by Pantera when that album came out. I absolutely hated the album, and now it's definitely one of my favorites. So it's like,
Yeah,
I think sometimes you're just not in the right set of mindset, or you're not in the right place to really be able to absorb what the record has for you. And this album definitely has a little bit of that. I think you guys are criminally underrated as a band, like really criminally underrated.
thank
Like
you.
the songwriting, the way you guys tie everything together. That's why when I saw this, I was like, I'm dying to ask you these questions because I'm curious. It made me super curious, and that's a good thing. Like when you
Yeah,
listen
I
to
think so
music and
too.
you become curious about the art itself. And listen to you now, things make a lot more sense. So I think now when I go listen to the record again, my perception of the album is going to be completely different than what it was before.
But I'm glad in a sense because if if it was just another Winterfylleth album, say, to your ears, and that's like, oh yeah, I like that, that's some cool riffs or something. I don't know, like, is that good enough after nine out or on a ninth album after 8 albums? Is that fine just to put another one out just to go and play again? I don't know. I sort of get a bit cynical about this idea of just making another album to have something to take out to give you a reason to go and tour again or whatever it might be. And so even though we have followed the last one up fairly quickly, and obviously our circumstances have changed with the new label and everything like that, then I didn't just want it to be just some stopgap because we changed labels and we're kind of trying to get on the festival circuit or something. It's they all come from a good place, and because it's not our entire um life and income and everything like that, then you can be a bit more discerning with it. You're not just like, right, we've only got 6 weeks to make this, and then we've got to go on a 3 month world tour or something. We're not those guys, so you've got that bandwidth to think about it a bit more and to self edit and to critique yourself, I guess. So hopefully it all manifests in the final thing. And I certainly feel like we've got 4 guys writing in the band now, and it's as collaborative as it's been. We're pushing into new territory with like Mark's keyboards having a stronger role, and our new guy Mark Doyle having a lot more writing input on this one and things like that. So there's some twists and turns hopefully still to come, and I hope it's not just another record.
Do you look at each album as a chance to continue not only to improve as far as the overall band is concerned, but you look at it as also a chance for you to grow individually?
I guess it's easy to sort of post rationalize that and say yes you do or no you don't, but oftentimes you're just kind of like full steam ahead with these things. Sometimes you forget to kind of put your foot on the ball and look backwards a little bit because it's like, right, we've got a festival, we've got this coming up, video shoot, this, that, and the other. And almost like the albums are like snippets of time when you've had some opportunity to think about it. And I guess you don't always want it to be that way. Obviously, we've got better at the production element of it. We're much better players now than when we started. You become better at songwriting, and it's strange. Like I often don't want to run away from what is the core of the sound, the idea of Winterfylleth, because I also think that is quite a unique thing to us. I think you can tell it's a Winterfylleth song when you hear it,
Oh yeah.
and I don't always think that bands always have that. And so I'm sort of loath to run away from the identity of the band, but I also don't just want it to be the same repetitive stuff, the same chords in different sequences or something, which can be a criticism, I guess. And I want it to have purpose and meaning and not just be another album. So I'm glad we landed with the great aesthetic this time. I'm glad we landed with the great concept, and I do think the music sort of stacks up to that. So the fact that you, as an experienced listener of the band, is getting challenged by some of that, I can only see that as a good thing because it's giving you pause to go, what the fuck? So hopefully that's
Yeah, because
that's a good
because
thing.
you guys created first of all, when I listen to you guys, I always know I'm listening to you guys. I don't need a full song. I need like a few minutes, not even minutes, a few seconds of a track. You guys have a very distinct style and sound. Having said that, you don't have two records that sound alike. All of them have different uniquenesses to them that make them what they are, that record. And on this album, you guys almost created, from a track listing standpoint, you almost created a prog album, even though it doesn't sound like a prog album. Which I thought it was like, okay, now they unlocked another door, so God can only help us in terms of
Yeah,
what's
yeah, yeah.
next. You know what I mean?
Yeah, who knows? And I like it. I like this this way of doing it, and I think it was comfortable this time. We were pressured with like what we put on ourselves to do it so it could come out now for our touring and us and our summer stuff, I guess, in like not necessarily that we like had to do it for now or we need something to go and tour, but it's just like, we had a lot of plans already in place. And so it was like, look, if we don't do it kind of in this year we've got now, then you're into, for example, next year's our 20th anniversary. So you want to do things for that. And you want to, then you do want to leave it another year before you do one. So there was a little bit of like, it just sort of needed to be now with a new label and everything, but it didn't feel like we were doing it in a contrived manner just to sort of have something to push. It was just the sort of the right moment for us to try and conjure it, I guess. And so it's been an interesting 12 months within the band, and we've been a lot busier than perhaps the outward perception might be. But also, I'm happy about it. It's been good to get us all together and bring everyone's creativity out. And I really look forward to people hearing this one. I think it's a good one.
Was this a more challenging record when you look at some of the previous ones, at the eight previous ones?
It wasn't. To be honest, it was one that came out quite easily. And I think that can be good sometimes. There's a few of the tracks, like the track in Ash and Wake, which is the one of the longer ones. That was that was a real pain to finish. I had the idea of that floating around for a few years, like certainly half of it, and I probably wrote about like 9 endings to it. And so I think sometimes you have to toy around with these things for a while. There's a track on it called "A Hollow Existence," which me and Mark Wood, our old guitar player, wrote I think in 2009 when we were doing our album Mercy and Sphere. We wrote one or two riffs from that, and I kind of resurrected that and thought, actually, why did we not do this? I sort of found it on an unlabeled or pen labeled 2009 demo or something, and so it was nice to kind of like dig into the archives a little bit. But then we've got Mark Deeks, who's a virtuoso pianist and great player, and in his own right with his own band, writing now. We've got Russ, obviously, who's been in the band a few years now and writing well. Mark Doyle, who's come in to replace Nick recently, who's got a wealth of experience writing and stuff. And so it just felt like, where in previous albums you might have a blocker of like, what do we do with this bit now? Like, where do we go? And no one's got really any idea. And so you end up like kicking the can down the road. Someone always seemed to have an idea, or oh no, it could do this or that. And sometimes we had the which fork in the road do you choose? So actually it was a good one from that respect. And I think that had really made it come out quickly, because we did it in we started it in June. So where are we now? The end of February. So it's
Yeah.
not that long since we started writing it. There was a few tracks that we had finished in the previous album session for the last album that we didn't materialize on that because they didn't fit with what it was. And so I think that also gave us a bit of a jumping off point for what this one has become. And I think that was a good thing, because it's not always a blank sheet of paper. I think sometimes the blank sheet of paper is the challenging thing for an artist. It's like, what can this be? Whereas at least if you've got a little bit of a direction, then you're not like, shit, we need to write 10 songs and we've got no songs. So it was a good place to be, I think.
At what point in the process did you guys think of, let's do a Paradise Lost cover and put it on the record?
Quite late in the process, in truth. I was obviously, as you'll know from the previous 4 or 5 albums, we've done just like bonus tracks. Like obviously you do deluxe versions of the albums and people want extra tracks and things like that. But also it's nice for you to, at least in our opinion, to do sort of a homage to the influences that you had when you were coming up, and the tracks that have had an impact on how you write, or even just to sort of try and do a reverent version of songs that you love. And I guess that we've done that with Emperor, we've done it with Enslaved and with Ulver and things like that. And so on this record, we wanted to do something slightly different. I guess what sits around this is that a few of us, myself and both Marks in the band, play in Mark, our keyboard player's solo project, Arth, which is a kind of like melodic doom project. For people that maybe know my history a bit better, like my other band that sits around Winterfylleth is Atavist, which is kind of death doom sort of stuff. And so doing a doom metal track in the context of the Winterfylleth album, I guess feels odd if you don't know who we are, but if you do, then maybe it's not. And so in Mark's Art project, Jeff Singer has been playing drums in that for a little while until recently. And he's like rejoined Paradise Lost recently. And so it just I don't know, it just felt like a right thing to do. Like I grew up in Huddersfield where Paradise Lost and Peaceville and My Dying Bride and all those guys kind of are from as well. And I don't know, it's just a kind of all things considered, it was a in the end kind of a no-brainer to do something like that. But there's a multitude of factors as to why. It's a reference to my hometown, my history, Mark's Doom stuff, my Doom stuff, and then obviously knowing Jeff and those guys a little bit more recently, then it's just felt like a nice thing to try and do. And so we did a slowed down, more doom metal version of it. Because if you know the original, which I'm sure many people will, it's the first track from Draconian Times. It's like super famous, but it's like a gothic rock song originally, whereas now it's a much more kind of fully formed, I guess, doomy track with a big pianos and big vocals and things like that. So it felt like it had a bit of our personality, but we'd also done a quite reverent cover of it.
Yeah, I recorded my review already. I actually put that one down as one of my favorite songs on the album because I thought you guys did what I like a cover to be, which is I can tell what the original is, but it sounds like your song if you guys were to make it from scratch,
Yeah,
kind of way. And I like that. I don't like a band to necessarily just try to imitate what the original was, because if I want to listen to the original, I just go listen to the
the
original.
original.
Like, I mean, like, there's no point in that. I want to see some
Yeah.
creativity behind it. And I thought perhaps the most challenging aspect, because sound-wise, you can always change things and still stay very close to the original. But I thought perhaps the biggest challenge for a song like this is the vocals. But I thought the vocals, while being different, obviously, they were really good, like really, really good. And I was blown away by how good the vocals on this cover are. Like they just give the song this new version of the song such a soul. Like and especially when you're coming on a record where everything is so heavy and so dark, and you get to that bottom end, and you have like this following an instrumental track, you get this fresh air coming into this track. I thought it was beautifully done.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting song to try and sing because if you hear the original, like obviously Nick Holmes is a great vocalist and has a sort of multitude of styles, but you can tell when you hear that record originally that he's gone from being that kind of gruff sort of death doom singer of gothic and the early albums, and then they've kind of come through into the Draconian Times era, and he's kind of singing, but there's a little bit of sort of shout to it still, and it's the sort of the James Hetfieldiness of it is kind of still there before he becomes what it becomes later on. And so if you actually pay attention to the original, it's not like desperately in key. It's like quite like shouty singy, and it sort of plays around with the tone. And actually, like when you sing it like in like exact tune, I guess, if you like, it's quite a different contrast because there's a grit to him that you really can't capture very well unless you are him. And so unless we'd got him to do it, which would have been weird, maybe I think, then
Yeah, that would have been weird.
then we sort of did our best with it. And it's actually Mark, our keys player, who's singing that one, not me. And it's one of his favorite songs, and I think he considered doing something in his own art project, doing Paradise Lost. But it just felt like the right thing to do in the studio. He had the passion for it, and he managed to find that kind of grittiness in himself to land the big notes. And
It's really interesting you say that because the original feels vocally feels a little bit more unhinged, or
yeah,
very close to it, and this one feels way more controlled. But it's a beautiful take on that song, and I thought the vocals were phenomenal. I'm glad you're saying it's not you, because I was like, man, if this is you, like you've been
yeah.
holding back on us, like why haven't we seen something like this before?
I mean, I can sing, I think we've done it before, but we did a full acoustic album of me singing, but it just was, it's in Mark's DNA, and it was one of his favorite songs for a long time. So I didn't put my foot down in the studio like, no, I'm the vocalist. I was like, he was always doing it. So like, right, fine, you do it. It was and he did a great job. It took him a few goes to kind of find the right place for it in his range, and to to nail the kind of the hard bit is like not just singing it too sweetly. You've got to nail that kind of slight gravel behind it, which I think to Nick Holmes' credit is a really difficult thing to do. And whether he was intending to do that or not on the original, like you say, it is mildly unhinged, but then that lends to it what it is. And I think if it's one of those songs for you that's a classic, then it's a risky thing to do. But I hope we did it justice, and I look forward to people's kind of views on it as well, because it's it was meant as just a kind of bonus track, and it's meant as a nice little escapade for us to try and do something different. But equally,
I
you know,
loved it. I loved
it's
it.
got to sit within the rest of it, hasn't it?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought you guys did a phenomenal job. Definitely one of my favorite songs on the album. Chris, man,
Brilliant.
thank you very much for your time. I hope I run across you guys at some festivals this summer and see you guys play. It's been a long time. I think the last time I saw you guys, if I'm not mistaken, was Inferno.
Right. Okay.
In
Only a few
20,
years ago. What,
yeah, yeah,
24?
2024. You guys played
Not
Inferno.
terrible. Yeah.
I think that's the last time I saw you guys. It was a
Okay.
great show. I was really excited to see you guys at that festival because, it's not like you come to North America every year. So, I have
No,
to.
we've never been. No, we've never been with this band. But it was very difficult though, like I'm sure people are not super interested in the logistics of this stuff, but the situation to get into like obviously the USA, which is usually where you'd go, and you might veer into Canada for a few shows or something like that. But if you're traveling to the States, you're looking at like 2, 3 thousand US dollars for a visa per person. You're looking at how much flights are for everybody, and that's before you land and have to hire equipment in a van. Like
Yeah.
what size shows have you got to be playing to risk that? You've got to be doing 3 or 4, 5, 6 weeks of touring sometimes, like some of our friends from the UK do. And it's got to be a risk. So it's been very difficult for us to go over there actually. So I would advocate people petition their politicians for this stuff, or unless we start some kind of crowdfunding for it, then I think it's not the most likely we'll get to the States, which is disappointing because I know we've got a huge fan base there. But yeah, well, I guess that if they want people want to see us, then we play in Europe all the time. But it's very difficult for us to get over there. So we've got some big festivals this summer. I don't know what you're doing, but we're playing the Hellfest in France. We're playing Mystic Festival in Poland. We're playing Hole in the Sun in Germany. Got some other small ones coming up later in the year and some sort of Central European touring. And then we're going out with Black Braid. I don't know if you know those
Oh,
guys
yeah, yeah,
from
yeah. I saw them in Toronto late last year. I mean, I've seen them
right.
a bunch of times live. Amazing band.
Well, they're coming over to the UK in a few weeks' time. We're going out the second week of April for 7 or 8 days around the UK and into Ireland as well. So that should be fun with
That's
those
a great
guys, hopefully.
lineup.
So yeah, yeah.
That's a
And this
great
band
lineup.
Naughton from Spain. I don't know if you know them, but
Yeah.
it should be cool. Yeah, so we've got quite a bit coming up. So don't know. Maybe see you on one of those, or if not,
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be back in Norway at some stage, and we want to do a bit more with this one. So hopefully we'll be back quite soon.
I'm looking forward to whenever our paths cross because I enjoy your music tremendously. So watching it live is always I consider it to be such a blessing, and I think we have to take these opportunities sometimes. We listen to so much live music and music in general that we take things for granted. But I think we have to enjoy these moments as almost if they were our last, in order for us to really get everything that you guys have to offer to us. So. As always, man, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your music. And thank you for making my mind spin with this track listing on this record.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you for having us again, and I look forward to the next time, and see you on the road.
See you, man. Take care. All the best.
Cheers. You too. Bye.